Hey guys, it's Dave. Happy Monday. Hope you're all having a good week. Today, I figured I'd take a look at the most recent conference that Adam Spice, the CFO of RKLB, attended. Apparently, he dropped some pretty interesting details about the company, as we do have earnings coming up as well tomorrow. So I did see a couple brief highlights, kind of like tweets of things he said, but I always find when you miss out on listening and watching to the whole thing, you miss a lot of nuance and color on what they're kind of trying to get across without announcing things that they're not allowed to announce. So I'm going to cut this up as I usually do and try to break it down into only the most important clips of the conference, as well as my reactions to the things he said. And I'd like to hear from you in the comments down below if you agree with my thoughts, if you have any other thoughts about the things he's saying. Before we do that, I hope you will consider subscribing. It helps out so much with the channel as I try to keep growing it and make it something that's kind of worth my while to spend all this time on. All right, let's get to it.
And we've gotten very consistent feedback from our customers, particularly government customers, that are saying, hey, look, we want to have a partner that can really service our needs from concept to orbit. And so that's resonated with us. And Pete's initial vision for the business was never to be just a launch company. In fact, he designed Electron in such a way where it would be leveraged in a way where you can actually put a payload on orbit after you've delivered a payload for a customer. So the size of the rocket, its architecture and everything around it was designed to kind of kill two birds with one stone. But now we're taking that.
It's a little interesting. I didn't know he designed it with the thought in mind of delivering something else after you deliver for a customer. Maybe that goes back to some plans that never went to fruition, because as far as I'm aware right now, RKLB doesn't have any plans to launch their own payloads on Electron. They're kind of saving that for Neutron. At least it appears that way.
We then said, okay, well, not only do you have to build stuff, but you have to, there's a lot of IP that needs to be generated to be able to do really sophisticated things on orbit. And so we started choosing satellite design opportunities or contracts that would teach us something, and our customers would pay for us to learn. So that's essentially what we've done, is we've gone out, we've acquired a bunch of key subsystems, we've developed other key subsystems in-house, we've executed on some pretty big programs that allow us to prove that we can build things that can operate in really harsh environments under stringent conditions. And really all that's missing now from the grand scheme of things is kind of fleshing out some more of those key subsystems and on the bus, also put some payload kind of capabilities in play, but then also develop that end market application. So I would say it feels like we're several innings into this game, and what this capital raise really allowed us to do was
just to cut off there for a second, a couple things interesting. So obviously he talks about payload, which is something he mentioned previously that they might look to acquire a company that does that. Also, yeah, it was pretty cool how he mentioned how they accept missions very particularly so that they can try to learn something from different ones. And this is something Peter Beck has said previously as well. Like they took the Varda capsule mission, very interesting one, and it kind of doing that taught them a lot about re-entry. And the big contract they got with Globalstar for those large satellites, those buses are going to be doing some communications, and they've mentioned being interested in like the direct to phone a few times here and there. So yeah, very interesting, and really can't wait to see if the next acquisition is around payload. It may give us a clue as to what their intentions are, because if it's some sort of communications manufacturer that makes antennas, then we can think, well, they're probably looking at some kind of communication satellite. If it's some kind of company that makes like camera lenses for Earth observation, then we might know down the line, oh, their payloads are going to be, their own constellation is going to be Earth observation. So it could be very interesting. Something Scott actually mentioned in his recent video, and I thought that was a very good point. So we could learn a lot about the future of the company based on their next acquisition.
And the gaps that you're talking about, and the tuck-ins that you'd like to do, are going to be more on the spacecraft side of things?
Yeah, so I think it's really going to be more on, there's a couple key subsystems in the bus that we still work with third parties on that we would like to have a little bit more control over. And then, of course, we currently don't have any payload capabilities. So payload is going to be one of those. It's more of a greenfield opportunity for us to really start building some capabilities there. To, when we either are a sub for the bus to have as many pieces for that, or the prime where we pull it all together. Again, we're just looking to extinguish or retire any risks to these pinch points where either time or cost are going to be very important to delivering the program.
So I think we all knew it, but yes, 100% now they are looking at acquisitions for sure. Yeah, the other thing is, so if they do make an acquisition for like some kind of spacecraft bus component, which is kind of the main body of the spacecraft, that may not tell us very much. It's really the payload part that I am at least the most interested in, because I think it could give us a big clue as to what their eventual constellation could do. Because if they're planning to go into, say, communications or space-based solar, I really don't think they're going to buy a Earth-based observation payload company. It wouldn't make sense.
And payload is a pretty, vague word to use, I guess, right?
Yep.
Because that can mean a lot of different things. Are there any particular kind of mission sets that you think where you're seeing a lot of demand where you want to make sure you're well positioned?
Well, I think that
I feel like this is one where he just can't answer, right? Because you can't really say until you're ready to announce, and they're clearly not ready to tell everyone what it is yet. But I appreciate the interviewer for kind of prodding and seeing if he can dig a little deeper on this.
it's true. In every space vertical, there's kind of multiple branches to those, right? So you think about the fact that with Earth observation, you've got optics,
Optical, yeah,
you've got SAR, you've got SIGINT, you've got lots of different ways to play that to play those various markets. In the comm side, you've got probably even more different flavors or paths you can go down, whether it's direct to mobile, broadband communications, backhaul for government and enterprise customers. So it's a very broad area. So we haven't nailed that down yet as to exactly what subvertical that we're going to focus on. Right now, we've got our hands full executing on the big programs that we have in house today, which include the MDA Global Star contract that's addressed at supporting direct to mobile.
Yeah, as I expected, a kind of non-answer on that one. And to be honest, I don't blame him. But you got to think if they're raising this capital, they do know, at least in general, what they want to buy. I don't think you raise $300 million and say like, okay, well, we're not sure what we're going to use it for. I don't think that's how it works. But yeah, I appreciate the fact that he cannot answer right now. It's just not something they're prepared to reveal.
The biggest piece of that is really launch. Launch we view as the hardest piece to get right. And I think that the days of funding kind of new launch startups is largely behind us. I mean, we still see some financings kind of that get disclosed, but we scratch our heads like, well, what do they really? Do they really think there's still a window for that? Right. Because we think that the launch game is so competitive and it's so capital intensive, and heritage, like everything in space, is super important. So we think that window for kind of new entrants into launch is, for the most part, probably closed, at least for now.
That's interesting. So not really worried about new competitors arising. There was a ton of capital, obviously, a few years ago going to all these startups. Some of them went under, obviously, Astra, Virgin Orbit. Relativity still going strong with their development. Obviously, Stoke is a new-ish comer to the space. So I guess maybe he doesn't consider them falling into next generation new startups. But yeah, the cost of launch has driven down so far that it can be a little difficult for newcomers to get going and really disrupt a market that has already been disrupted just recently.
Yeah, fortunately for this, if you look at the backlog of spacecraft that we have and the contracts that we've been executing on over the last several years, they're not trivial programs. I mean, there's pretty sophisticated ones, including there's a couple satellites that we're executing on for NASA that are going to map the magnetic poles of Mars. Right, we've done some pretty sophisticated developments for the MDA constellation needs there, and so we're able to leverage a lot of the IP that we've developed for these other programs towards this SDA contract.
Yeah.
There certainly is more R&D to come, but I would say it's not as heavy an R&D lift as pretty much anything that's come before it. So we've now actually got our IP portfolio and kind of inventory of capabilities and subsystems to the point where a lot of that work has been done. Because some things that were really complicated to do, like for example, when you look at the Global Star MDA program, that required us to develop some IP that could survive in some pretty harsh radiation environments, have longer lives on orbit than a typical small satellite constellation. And I think that what this program does, and we try to be very strategic in only taking on work that ultimately leads us to a point where we can put it to work for our own benefit, for our own infrastructure on orbit down the road, where we want to own applications.
So it's nice to hear, obviously, that SDA contract is absolutely huge for the company, and it's going to deliver a ton of the revenue. To hear him say that, it's not as heavy of a lift as some of the things that have come before, because they've already developed those capabilities, or at least a lot of them through those future contracts. It's pretty comforting that, it doesn't sound like they think it's going to be tough for them to complete this deal. Obviously, they will still have to develop some stuff and they'll have to learn a lot. But yeah, I guess the Global Star specifically in developing those buses and their much larger size probably helps a lot.
And you mentioned that you will be airing the payload from somebody else.
Yep.
Have you named the partner yet on that?
I don't believe we've made the payload.
That's fine. Do they have to go out and?
By the way, I'd love to hear who is providing the payload on this, because I think we all know Rocket Lab likes to acquire companies they work with and have worked with previously and are comfortable with. So I was trying to think, are there what companies do payload have they worked with? And if anyone has a list out there, that'd be great, because I think, if we're looking at possible acquisitions, it could come from a list of companies that they've already worked with.
Well, we won't release all of that data, but essentially you can think about 2024 as really kind of closing out the remaining R&D elements. And then we start to kind of go more into the actual kind of the manufacturing side of things in I'd say the second half of 2025, with payloads being launched in 2027. And that'll be bid out separately under the NSSL program. And of course, we'll put our hat in the ring on that with Neutron. So the timing actually might work out pretty well for that.
Right. Yeah, I want to get.
Yeah, I mean, he already mentioned that one previously, but they do fully plan to bid Neutron for the launch on these in the NSSL program, which means I guess they must be in that lane 1 that is open to those lighter rockets.
But I would suspect that, we'll have, as we exit 2024, we'll have a pretty granular view of kind of what the quarterized kind of rev ramps look like in 25, 26, and 27.
Okay, great, yeah. Because we're going to screw the modeling up unless you guys kind of help us out on that one.
Well,
I took a stab at it, but I have no idea if I'm anywhere in the ballpark.
Well, what's helpful for us is the fact that we do have that.
It's nice to know, by the way, that these, professional analysts struggle just as much as I do, and say Scott or Matt or any of the other guys trying to model some of these things that Rocket Lab talks about when we just don't have a ton of details on it. So yeah, it's nice to hear, I'm not alone on that.
So really, when you think about the Electron kind of roadmap over the next several years, it's all about just kind of increasing the cadence, because cadence is Electron's best friend when it comes to margin expansion. There's really a few things that will drive margin expansion there and get us towards our longer term target of roughly 50% non-GAAP gross margin. And cadence is the most important because it's all about fixed cost absorption. And when you operate things like launch sites that you control, those are costs that continue whether you're launching 1, 2, 5, 6 times in a quarter. So cadence is super important. Reusability is important as well. But of course, once you have a reusable booster, it can bring pretty significant benefits to your margin expansion as well, because no longer, like this year, we have a manifest of 22 launches. So we're building 22 rockets, right? But I think if you flash forward to the next couple of years where you've got high confidence in reusability, then you're building a much smaller set of those, and you can either kind of redeploy or kind of reduce your resources accordingly. So we've actually sized the business and the infrastructure for Electron to be able to launch up to 50 times per year. So one vehicle per week. Since we control our own range in New Zealand, we've got plenty of capacity there. There's very little air traffic to clear. So, and then with our Wallops pad, we've got now redundancy across continents, and we can support our government customers much more conveniently out of Wallops, Virginia. So we think that business has a kind of significant headroom as far as growth is concerned. We think that we've never designed our business plan to need to launch weekly. We've modeled out over the next several years where we think that can get into kind of the mid-30s type of launches per year. We think the market is plenty robust to support that, particularly as we've seen competition just pretty much evaporate, right? And we had competition like the Astras and the Virgin Orbits and the relativities of the world and ABLs and Fireflies, and I think what it's shown is how difficult it is to do. I mean, people think that a small rocket might be easier than a large rocket, and in a lot of ways what we found is actually small rockets are harder to do than large rockets because they're less forgiving. Particularly when you think about recovery and re-entering without using propulsive landing, we don't have that benefit, right? You have to do things very differently. And also when you're talking about a business where you have roughly an $8 million average selling price, it doesn't necessarily mean that you need fewer flight safety people just because the rocket's smaller, right?
Just to cut in there, he said they're looking at 35 launches, maybe mid-30s. I find that extremely exciting, at least for me, because one of the things I didn't have a lot of clarity on for the past several years when I'm doing my model, talking about all these financial models, is kind of where Electron would go beyond, say, 2024 launches. So previously, the guidance they've kind of been saying is 24 launches per year will get them to the margin profile they're looking to get to, and they would kind of talk about that 24 number so much. So then I was just like, well, are they going to go beyond that? Is that going to peak and then it's just going to be steady at 24? I wasn't sure. So for the next several years, what I had done is kind of model them to hit 24, then maybe 25, maybe 26, but relatively flat because I didn't have any guidance to say that it would continue to grow beyond that. And I thought it would just end up being a solid business of that size. But if they can really grow 35 launches a year, not only is that amazing for margins, it's just obviously, more launches, more revenue. So yeah, great news for the Electron line of business. Still disappointed to hear from the last video that reusability kind of taking a backseat this year. Don't think I fully understand that one yet. But I think maybe it just comes down to being scared of another anomaly, and obviously anomaly would be more likely the first time you're reflying a booster, and maybe they just feel like this year they have to get that cadence going, and they really don't want to chance another anomaly and be grounded for, say 3+ months. So anyway, very good news about the future of Electron's cadence, what he's saying there.
So Neutron starts to feather in. What does that, do we begin to cannibalize some of the demand for Electron as Neutron feathers in? And do you care?
And really, if you think about, yes, you can look at a transporter or bandwagon type of offering where they're putting hundreds, of satellites on a larger launch vehicle. That we've just heard back from our customers is really not. If they can be utilized, they'll utilize it. And what really, if you compare, Neutron is really a constellation deployer at the end of the day, right? And Electron is not that.
Yeah.
So Electron will still be there for these small, exquisite, kind of dedicated launch needs, and Neutron is going to come in and basically provide that constellation deployment capability, which is also important because right now we're building these constellations and then they're launching on SpaceX, right? So we don't like that, right? So we want to keep kind of it all in the family, if you will. So that's really what Neutron brings to the table. Of course, it also has other capabilities. It's longer term, the potential for doing things like ISS resupply and even human flight and so forth. So I think there's a lot of places that we can take that vehicle to get there, and we still have the target of getting Neutron to the pad by the end of this year.
Yep.
Which again, if we can do that, it'll be an unbelievable accomplishment compared to what other vehicles have taken to get to that point.
Right. First flight, fourth quarter.
So yeah, nice to hear they don't think Neutron will really cannibalize Rocket Lab's Electron vehicle. It's sort of completely different markets, which I do agree with. I wasn't really thinking they would cannibalize so much, but what it might do is compete on the rideshare front with SpaceX for those missions that they do those transporter missions on. Right now, if you have a small payload that can go on a rideshare mission, you're just going to do it because it's not even close really in terms of price, but there are some missions that those rideshares can't accommodate and have to go with the likes of an Electron. So yeah, Electron should be fine, and maybe Neutron can give some of those transporter missions a run for their money. I do think that would profile pretty well because from what I hear, those transporter missions in terms of the mass really don't fill up the Falcon 9. So Neutron being a smaller vehicle could say the same amount of payload would fill up a higher percentage of that Neutron rocket, probably get better margins out of it, at least I would hope.
This year. That'll be done out of New Zealand?
Get it to the pad. Nope, that's
get it to the pad.
At Wallops.
Okay.
Yep.
So you're emphasizing getting it to the pad. Tell me, what's that about?
Getting it to the pad could be getting to the pad and launching, or getting to the pad and then launching shortly thereafter.
Okay, got it.
So it's all ballpark.
I like this interviewer. He kind of calls them on all their trying to wordplay and finesse stuff, which, everyone does. But yeah, so I think this distinction here is them kind of have been gradually admitting it's probably not going to launch in 2024, but they'll have it on the pad by the end of 2024, which is what I've been expecting for a while, as we've kind of heard the language shift over the past year from launch to get to the pad.
So we think about SDA doing a lot of these constellations, right? We've got Globalstar, we've got Telesat, and OneWeb. Well, I guess OneWeb's done. Yeah, Kuiper. Exactly.
Interesting to hear Adam bring up Kuiper. I swear they talk about Amazon a lot. I do think there's a good chance those reaction wheels that they're going to be making, those larger reaction wheels, will be for Kuiper. But yeah, maybe they can do even more work with Amazon down the line, and this is just like a small hint that they kind of slide in there where they can without actually officially announcing anything.
If you look at like just an example of, Kuiper, for example, their first batch of launch procurements, like I think 85 launches across 3 different providers.
Yeah.
And in our model, we assume we launch, end of this year, and then next year we launch, maybe 3 times, and then maybe the next year we launch 8 times. So it's not like we're planning some.
3 to 8's a nice ramp, more than doubling. I don't think I heard that previously. I heard it was be 1 and then 3, but it's nice to hear that 8 number in terms of the third year, which would be, I guess, 2026, maybe 2027.
But we think there could be dramatic upside to the kind of the opportunity set, which again we'd have to evaluate kind of the incremental investment to support that much more significant.
Are we becoming self-financing so that you could, if the demand is there, we have the cash flow available to go feed that CapEx to ramp up those Neutron launches?
I think for the most part, I think that it depends. If you get a demand signal back from, for example, your government customer or a large commercial constellation, I know you're planning on launching 8 times in 2027.
Yeah.
We'd like to take 12 launches ourselves.
Yeah.
That might cause us to go put some more capital for another pad at Wallops, for example.
Right.
Or to put a little bit more productive capacity in the ground around the manufacturing side of things. But I will say, much like Electron, where we have the ability to build 50 plus vehicles per year with our existing footprint and existing equipment, we were very fortunate in the timing last year when we acquired the Virgin Orbit assets out of bankruptcy. And so we have a lot of capacity for engines and avionics out of Long Beach. So one of our buildings in Long Beach builds avionics and propulsion for both Electron and for Neutron with a tremendous ability to scale. So we don't need any more space for propulsion or avionics. We just took a lease not that long ago on a large facility in Middle River, Maryland, to make the large-scale composites. So the first couple Neutrons are being hand-laid up in both the U.S. and in New Zealand, but going forward, we have the high capacity automated fiber replacement machine and all those capabilities at Middle River. So I think we've got good footprints pretty much where. The only thing, again, that might need more capability would be more investment in final integration facilities at Wallops and perhaps a second pad at Wallops.
Interesting to hear them talk about a second pad there. Obviously, that's more long-term, but it would be nice to see. I don't think they've mentioned that previously.
But yes, I think that we always kind of think forward and say, okay, well, what if the demand signal is much stronger than we've kind of built into our base case? Will we be able to basically flex and go address that? And I think for the most part, yeah, I mean, with beta in full swing and so forth, we should be able to hopefully self-finance that. But if the opportunity was big enough, then we could go back to investors and ask for more kind of expansion capital.
Yeah, I don't know how some retail investors would feel about a future capital raise. Let me know down in the comments below what you think. I've seen some people who are pretty unhappy with the most recent one when it was announced, but he's saying, if the signals are that there's massive demand there, they could potentially at some point raise again. Personally, I kind of was saying I would hope they were done, but I guess maybe if it allows them to grow extremely quickly and meet a ton of future demand, it could be worth it. Let me know how you feel about that one. I'm not too sure yet how I feel. I'll have to think about that further.
But I think now that we've established ourselves as a U.S. government prime, we think the size of opportunities continues to get larger in front of us. So we have a pipeline of very attractive opportunities, both commercially and on the government side. And on the government side, more and more high-value, important, classified, strategic types of programs. So we think we're going to see more and more of that work coming our way over time. Yeah. So, from the very beginning with Neutron, we knew that it was going to be important for that to have, a lot of government support. We don't subscribe to the kind of the build it and they will come approach, right? So along those lines, we secured a $24 million development contract with Strategic Space Command to help build the upper stage of Neutron. So we very much went into this with the customer helping define what their requirements are. And I think we're also kind of at a unique point in the supply and the launch side where you've got one company, SpaceX is such a dominant, force in that market. And now it's encouraging that you see, ULA's Vulcan vehicles flown, which is great.
Yep.
And so we think that, that there's going to be room for multiple providers and, actually, by law, there has to be multiple providers.
Right.
So we think we're about to come in and really offer something different. If you look at across, SpaceX, ULA, Blue, their ownership structures and kind of their motivations and like that, they're very different than what we bring. And none of them bring what we think is that end-to-end solution for that government customer. And we actually had the government customer say, look, we want somebody who can take our a program from soup to nuts, right? So from concept, design the satellite, build the satellite, launch the satellite, operate the satellite, right? That's really what we want. And we're really now the first company that's really in a position to exploit that. right, in a meaningful way.
It's interesting. Yeah, I never really thought about it, but I guess Blue Origin, could potentially launch for the government. They're not really looking at building out satellites for the government or anyone else, really. I mean, they've got their Blue Ring spacecraft, but yeah, I don't think they're doing contracts to build out satellites for anyone. Same with ULA. So SpaceX is really mostly manufacturing Starlinks in their own thing, or at least right now. They've done a few satellites for government. But yeah, I guess Rocket Lab could be one of the only one-stop shops for the government to, design, build, assemble, launch their whole constellation.
Capability set, maybe?
Oh, yeah, never underestimate SpaceX.
Yeah,
I think,
okay.
and we don't. When that's your primary, competitor, again, it makes for a few sleepless nights. But right now, it seems like their focus is Starlink.
Yeah.
Right. That's really their path. And I think if they were to decide, or they get that well in hand, and they've got the cycles to go dedicate resource elsewhere, I suspect that if it's not after Starlink, it might be Mars or something else, right? Rather than doing other.
That's the ultimate goal there, I think, right? With those guys.
Yeah, we all try to figure that out.
Yeah.
So that's the end of the conference. I thought there was definitely some interesting tidbits there. The 35 launches for Electron down the line, or at least mid-30s, is an extremely exciting number for me. Hearing that there could be 8 launches of Neutron in that third year, so going 1, 3, then 8. That's an important number that I can also add to my financial models. And tomorrow, for the earnings call, we will get a lot more information that I can use to update my models there as well. So I'm excited to live stream that, listen to it with you guys if you're interested. And after that, I will be able to plug a lot of these numbers in that they're giving us in terms of projections and get a better idea of what kind of revenue numbers I think they'll be seeing, in the next 5 years. So very exciting time for Rocket Lab and for shareholders. I hope you found this interesting. I found it very interesting. I always do. I always like to listen to all of these that I can. I hope you will tune in with me tomorrow for that earnings call. I hope you have a great rest of the week. If you haven't subscribed already, please consider doing so, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.